Welcome to Underwire Podcast. If you're new, I'm Dominique. If you are returning, thank you. Please hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube. Today we are joined with Dr. David Bauer. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And today I just want you to practice some caution with, if you have any little ones listening, it might not be an appropriate show for little kids, but definitely tweens and teens. So today we are talking about an incident that definitely changed Dave's life forever, I would say. Would that be safe to say?
Yes.
And we are going to be talking about drunk driving and in 1977. Mm-hmm. And you will let us know a little bit more about that. Dave, unfortunately, was drinking and driving and killed someone.
Yes.
Yes. And I appreciate your frankness and your honesty and everything you've done since then to just reach out and try to educate and, not only turned your life around, but you're giving back now. So I'm just going to go over a brief bio of Dave. He presently is an outreach educator for West Branch Drug and Alcohol Abuse. He's been there since 2016. For 33 years, he was a professor of health sciences at a local university. And before that, for about 4.5 years, he was a health educator at a local high school. And then he was an adjunct faculty, he had an adjunct faculty position at 2 different colleges. And Dave, I found this interesting that the course that you taught was death education.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't even know that existed. So that's interesting. Yeah. And you obviously have your PhD in health education.
Yes,
you
correct.
Served in our military. Thank you for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you.
1968 to 1971. You were also a football coach at a local college, Lycoming College. And you also played collegiate football at Lock Haven. And you coached at Lycoming with one of my favorite people, Frank Girardi. Yeah. For, how long did you coach with him again?
I think 20 years, close to 20 years.
18 years. Yes. Yeah, great. An amazing coaching career. Your community service, I'm not going to hit everything, but I'll just hit some of the highlights. You are involved in GRASP, which is grief recovery after a substance passing. Yes. I'll put the link under the video on YouTube in case people need some education or they have a loved one that's suffering from substance or alcohol abuse. When I interviewed Carolyn Mealy, she told me about going to those meetings and it helped her so much when her son passed away of a drug overdose. You are on the Veterans Drug Court as a mentor. DUI Advisory Council, and a few other ones. I'll just highlight kind of the bigger ones. Speaker at the DUI Offender Victim Impact Panel. You've given seminars at state correctional systems. Let's see. You were involved with MAD, of course. Everybody's familiar with that, Mothers Against Drunk Driving organization. And then you even went around to numerous high schools and colleges and spoke on behalf of MAD, right? National presenter for MAD. Okay. And you have some professional awards, a Peers Choice Award, Excellent in Advisement, Governor's Highway Safety and Alcohol Award, Lock Haven University Commencement Recognition Award, 20th Anniversary Lycoming County DUI Advisory Council. And I will end with a quote from one of your Peer Choice Awards. Your wisdom, compassion in helping students achieve their personal and professional goals is a prime example of excellence in advisement and makes you a role model, highly respected by your peers and students. So, having said all of your amazing accomplishments, let's go back to an unpleasant moment, which thank you so much for reliving it for us and so that others may learn. And Dave, hopefully we're going to be preventing this. I know we can speak to people after a DUI or after they've been drinking and driving and hopefully no casualties came of it. But I'm big on prevention. I think that's smart. So can you talk a little bit about first, like how old were you when you started drinking alcohol?
I didn't drink in high school. I drank right after I got out of high school, but nothing that caused a problem. You know, I might have a beer or two or go to a cabin with my buddies and have a drink, but drinking wasn't really, part of my life at all. And playing sports and so forth. And but when I went in the military, I spent most of my time overseas, okay? And one of the places I was, there wasn't a lot to do, so there was a lot of partying going on.
Can you share where you were?
It was called Karamsel Air Base in Turkey.
Okay.
And after that, then I went to the Philippine Islands for 15 months. And there was a lot of drinking there, a lot of nightlife. And, the key was I have finally realized over the years is that I developed a behavior, okay? And that behavior continued to intensify, okay? When I was in the Philippine Islands, I had a motorcycle because it was such a big Air Force base. And I used to drive the motorcycle intoxicated.
Well, back then, there was no education.
No.
So we're talking the 60s or the 70s at this point?
This was 1970 and 71.
Early 70s, no education.
No.
That was the culture that you were in, of course. So, okay. So did it ever become a problem for you? Like, did you ever enter into the territory where you thought you were an alcoholic?
No.
Okay. So, but the drinking and driving, again, it was just kind of accepted back then, to be honest. Well, take me to the night of the accident then. So it is 1977, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, let me start the day off. Now, because the crash, in MAD we use the term crash because accidents aren't preventable.
Okay.
I had an accident. Well, you didn't intend to do that. But
good.
A crash, you had control.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah.
I will start
Most
saying
people
crash.
use,
Okay.
But anyway, I went to a good friend's wedding in Matoursville. It was an afternoon wedding. And then right following that, it was a reception at the church, Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church. And my date was a young lady from Lock Haven. And so we went to the reception, and of course, I had too much to drink. And I knew that. I realized it. And it was the day before football camp started at Lycoming. And so...
And you were coaching there at the time?
I was coaching there. And so that after the reception, one of the coaches had a party for all the coaches and their wives because we knew that we weren't going to be seeing them very much for the next month or so. But so I went, and when we left the reception, okay, I told that young lady to drive. I said I had too much to drink.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so I went to the party and didn't have anything to drink. And then it was still early, so a couple of coaches, myself and their wives, and the girl I was with, we went to a place called Gentleman 3, all right, which was very popular. And I didn't have anything to drink, and she's driving the whole time. So finally it gets time to go. I'm getting tired. I got to get up early the next morning. So she drove the car, okay? And before we got out of Williamsport, I was asleep. And I woke up in front of her house in Lock Haven.
Okay.
All right? But she drove. I was being responsible, or I was just tired.
That's what strikes me about this so far. You've been responsible the whole day up till this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was more I was tired.
Right.
Okay? So I walked her to the door, and she lived with her parents, and she said, my brother's out of town. You can stay here tonight. You got a long way, because I lived in Matoursville at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, no. And my exact words when I left is, don't worry, nothing ever happens to me.
Oh, my gosh.
But I felt very tired, and so I stopped by a friend of mine's house in Lock Haven to see if I could stay there.
Right.
And nobody was home. So I said,
my gosh.
I can make it. Well, I drove, and I remember right at the 287 interchange there where you would go up to Salisbury was that stand and all. I pulled over there, rolled the windows down, and got out, because I felt that tired.
Wow.
And then...
they say God, then he taps you on the shoulder.
Yeah.
I feel like God was tapping you.
Oh, he was.
Way.
He was, but I wasn't listening.
No, you weren't. No.
And they were redoing the Beltway, okay? And the last thing I remember, I was probably a mile and a half from my house.
Oh, my gosh. Were you that close?
Yeah. And the last thing I remember is looking out. I was at the top of the or Sand Hill, they called it, okay? And I remember looking out, and you could see the lights in Montoursville. And then I woke up to two headlights. And
my gosh.
It was a direct crash. Pennsylvania State Police were running a radar check. If right before you get to the Walmart exit in Montoursville, there's an emergency crossover there. And the state police were doing a, radar. And it was 2:22 a.m. in the morning. And they guessed I had driven about an eighth of a mile asleep, and I crossed into the westbound lane and hit two people head on.
So was it two people in one car or two
car.
separate cars?
No,
So it was one car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Head on.
And without any braking. They didn't brake, and I didn't brake. And I was knocked out for maybe a few seconds, because I hit the windshield. I hit the steering wheel and broke the steering wheel, and then hit the window, okay, and then came back. Well,
back then, of course, no airbags.
No,
yeah,
no, and I didn't have a seatbelt on.
Oh well, no, back then again, no seatbelts either.
For me, and again, this is just a side note. Probably what saved my life is I just gotten a new car, and a big 1976 Grand Torino.
Oh.
And that
was a heavy.
Very heavy.
Yes.
And so I tried to get out of the car, and I couldn't because of the impact. And I slid across to the passenger side, and I was able to get out. And I remember getting out in the car. The victim's car was probably not 7 or 8 feet from me, and that's how violent it was. And I walked, I could hear people screaming, and I walked up to the driver's side, and I looked in, and his head was back, and there was blood coming out of his ear and his nose. But I thought he was all right because his eyes were open.
Oh.
And so I started back around my car to go to the passenger who was trying to get out of his car. And that's the last thing I remember until I was in the emergency room.
You probably just passed out.
Yeah, and I remember laying on the highway, and the state police were over me, and everything was very blurry, but I could hear those emergency radios and the lights, and I remember that badge that the trooper had on. And he said to me, "Have you been drinking tonight?" And I said, "Yes." And that's all he said to me. And then I woke up in the emergency room at Divine Providence, okay? And I couldn't see any, I was, hurt pretty bad also, but
I'm sure the shock of adrenaline, though, overrode your drunken state at this point.
It did. I was in a cubicle, and, there were medical people around me. And then your last guest, Peachy, came. She was working that night.
Oh, was she as a nurse?
As a nurse.
Oh, my gosh.
And I remember vaguely saying, "What happened?" And she said, "Well, there was an she said there was an accident." I said, "Well, is everybody all right? And she said, no. She said there was a fatality.
Oh.
And then just, but, you know, she was very, helpful.
Sensitive with
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Because you also suffered trauma at that point.
Well, yeah.
And you're waking up to somebody telling you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot for the brain to process.
Yep. And then I remember my parents got a call. And this was probably, the crash happened at 2:22 a.m. And probably they got the call, I say, around 3:30, 4:45. But my father came to the hospital.
How old were you?
I was 29.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the doctor came in.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Dr. Eckert. He was a plastic surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
In my face, all the bones in my face were broken. I had lacerations. But Dr. Eckert, was really upset with me. And he swore. He said, I won't say what he said, but he swore and said he's just tired of coming in at all hours of the morning taking care of you drunks.
Oh, my gosh.
And, I didn't realize the impact of that. But I stayed in the hospital for, I think, close to a week. I was in intensive care. And
what injuries to your body?
I broken ribs, okay, and just everything had all the bones were broken in my face, and I had a concussion. But I don't like to talk about that part of it, but it diminishes. Like I know my parents got the call, but they don't tell you what the situation is in regard to the injuries. They just say you need to come to the hospital. Well, my parents or my dad came to the emergency room, and that other family went to the morgue. And that's I kept asking questions, and after Peachy shared that with me, nobody. And then the Pennsylvania State Police came, and they said, we would like to take a blood alcohol test. Would you submit? And I was coherent enough, said yes. All right, because I really didn't think I was under the influence. Now, I had not had a drink since probably 1 a.m. or 1 p.m.
Okay, so you stopped drinking at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
2 o'clock, 1 or 2, and right after the reception, maybe a little later, because I think the reception started at about 1 o'clock. So at about 3 o'clock, I had nothing else to drink.
But even still, so 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you would plus you probably ate. You would think, okay, and then the lady you were with was driving, and
right.
So now it's 2 o'clock in the morning. So let that be a lesson to people. That was still impairing your cognitive function and still in your blood.
Right. And my blood alcohol was 0.10, which I was legally under the influence.
Wow.
Well, I had a very high tolerance for it too. Mm-hmm. So, but, and that goes to prove that, hey.
Don't fool yourself.
Right, exactly. I thought I was okay.
Because how many times even I have heard, oh, I've eaten a lot. It's been hours. Yeah. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm. No.
And you think, I don't know why we do this, but we think we're fine up here.
Oh, no. Well, and that attitude or mentality came from a history of drinking and driving since I got out of the military in December of 1971. Okay. So I had nearly 4 years of drinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, drinking training, basically. Yeah, basically. Unfortunately, yeah.
And so I started drinking. I kept drinking. And I had some really close calls.
And when you're young, you think you're invincible.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care what you say. We all did it. Yeah. We all thought it's not going to happen to us.
In fact, I was in a DUI crash in college, and I wasn't driving.
Oh.
But I spent 4 days in the hospital.
Are you serious? Yeah. Is this before your
I was in college.
Crash?
Yeah.
Who was driving?
Well,
Like a friend?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
a good friend of mine.
And everybody was okay?
Well, we both were in the hospital for a while. Yeah.
Okay, so let this be a lesson if there's any parents listening or anyone that is still drinking and driving, even if it's just 1 or 2 beers, 1 glass of wine, they think it's okay. Let this be a lesson that not only are you more inebriated than you think, but also you had a warning sign.
Mm-hmm. I had a lot of them.
You had a lot of them.
Yes.
And it just didn't even occur to you, I'm just still going to keep doing it.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Because my attitude was nothing ever happens to me.
Right. Okay, so let me go back to the hospital. Were you ever allowed to find out the victim's name?
Well, initially, no. Well, you could find out their name. You know, it was in the paper, but I wasn't allowed to contact them.
How old and what gender?
It was a male, and I believe he was 40 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
And his passenger was a female or a male?
Male.
And he was okay?
Well, he was in intensive care for a while too.
Wow.
And then it kind of became almost like it went away. I looked in the paper. I remember doing some research about the crash and so forth and the timeline, and I couldn't. There was nothing in the paper about it, and that was very puzzling to me. But once I got out of the hospital, okay, and I had just interviewed for a job at Williamsport High School, and I thought, this is it. I'm never going to get a job, but it was a different time.
It was
a lot different.
So was.
And
And can I ask you?
Yeah.
How long between the crash and you had a day in court? I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long? Do you remember?
It was December of 1977. I went to court.
And the crash was in August, I think you said?
August of 77.
So a few months.
Yes.
And you had to be nervous. You had to.
Oh, I was very nervous.
Did you think going into that courtroom, did you think you were going to go to jail?
Well, no, because
it was the 70s?
Here's what happened. And it was a plea bargain.
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
There was a significant time frame between the crash and when I was in the hospital, and they took the blood. All right.
Gotcha.
And so, my lawyer said, hey, when the crash happened, he could have been at a 0.08 or a 0.07 in his blood alcohol all the time that has passed. So it was a legal thing.
Sure.
But I was drunk. I knew that. And so they dropped the DUI.
Oh, my gosh.
They just charged me with homicide by motor vehicle. Okay. And so I remember the first thing is I had to go to the magistrate. Okay. And the magistrate was the father of a good friend of mine in Toursville. Mm-hmm. I thought I was really embarrassed. And the thing that stuck with me is my dad was a mechanic, and he knew all the state policemen. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, they came and got me at home and took me down. I felt so ashamed for my parents. And they fingerprinted me. And I remember leaving that. They took my picture, they fingerprinted me, and I couldn't get the ink off of my fingers. And in the worst way, I wanted to get it off. I was so embarrassed.
It was almost like metaphorically rubbing off the shame.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And anyway.
Did your dad ever speak to you about this?
We never talked about it. Again.
Because back then, parents just didn't talk about things that happened, did they?
No.
No.
My mom
There wasn't
did.
a whole lot of communication.
No.
What did your mom say?
She just, of course, you just weren't lucky, that's all. And I believed that for a long time. Why didn't they see me coming?
Yeah.
And
that was a mother's love for her child, trying to rationalize it so that you all could handle the impact, no pun intended, but the impact of what had happened. and still go on with your lives. Like that was almost like a coping mechanism of hers. Yeah.
Oh no, it was,
And especially during a time, again, I can't stress this enough, especially if somebody's younger and they're listening, they don't understand how like nobody talked about anything in the 70s, like nothing.
Right.
So, yeah.
No.
Okay.
Everybody, family wanted to be perfect.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
But
exactly. So you were extremely obviously ashamed, and your parents dealt with it in their own way. You're in court. What did you end up? What was your punishment? Like, what did you end up?
and
with?
It was the judge was Judge Raup.
Okay.
He was a young judge, and he had me come up front for the sentencing, and he talked a little bit about the crash and this and that and responsibility, and then he said, I mean, I didn't have a record, I'd never been in trouble, and he said, I want you to go out. He said, I want you to make a difference. He said, you can't bring those victims back or change what happened, but you can
change from this point forward.
Try to change those people and yourself. And I was sentenced to 1 year probation, lost my driving privileges for a year, and had to do I think it was 500 hours of community service. And I always said, what a very small price to pay. And so my mom was there, and coaches, Coach Girardi, and my friends I remember the right side of the courtroom. And when I was sentenced and it was over, I turned around and walking out of the courtroom, I looked back to my right. Okay,
I know what you're saying.
And there was two ladies sitting in the back pew with their heads down and their hands over their face, and they were crying. And I thought, well, what's that about? Well, not until later did I find out that was the victim's family, part of his family. And there was no advocates for them. I mean, they had to hear that here's a guy who was irresponsible, drinking and driving, and had a history of it, and never got arrested. And his first arrest is for,
he gets off with some probation and community service.
I mean, I couldn't imagine if that was my dad or my brother. I couldn't.
Oh my
But
gosh.
I buried it,
Sure.
I left that classroom feeling thankful that I didn't have to go to jail or
the courtroom.
or the courtroom. Yeah. So, so I
again, a different time.
Oh, yeah.
It was just, we were so less aware.
Mm-hmm. And many times, and during those days, they wanted a jury trial because they felt that out of 12 jurors, one or two of them probably drink and drive.
Yeah.
But we didn't.
Did you ever, moving forward, try to find the family or reach out to them?
I did, and I could not find anything. And that might sound, there was something.
Well, there was no internet back then.
No, and I couldn't find anything about them.
Well, thank you for reliving that. I know it has to be difficult.
I buried it. I got my license back. I didn't drink and drive. Obviously, I didn't drive at all for a year, but I continued to drink.
That's shocking to me.
Yeah. And
because God goes from a feather to a tap to a whisper to a brick, and that was your brick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that still didn't wake you up. How much longer did you continue to drink?
8 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And still drive.
Yeah. In fact,
my gosh.
I think there was two significant incidents that got me to thinking about my drinking. The first one was a friend of mine. I was really intoxicated, and
this is after the crash.
After I got my license back.
Okay.
And he said, "I'm going to drive. You can't drive." And I mean, he just, kind of belittled me up and down about, who do you think you are? And look what you did to a family, and now what you could do to another family or your family. And that first kind of hit home.
And was that the first person that ever was that frank with you? Because it seems like everybody else wanted it to go away. Don't talk about it. It didn't happen, which was the general mentality of the 70s. Mm-hmm. Let's not talk about anything. It didn't happen. Was he the first person to just put it in your face like that?
Mm-hmm.
So how important is communication?
Really important.
Very important, which is why you've probably spent the rest of your life communicating with other people.
Yes.
Did you seek out any therapy or faith-based organizations to help you process it as you moved along?
Well, over the years, I continued to drink, and then I drank. Then the only drinking I did was at home with my wife, and I would have a glass of wine,
mm-hmm.
but I wasn't drinking and driving. And I talked to some people who said, Dave, you need to take a look at your drinking and whether you're an alcoholic or not. And so I said, well, I'm not an alcoholic.
I just have a glass of wine every night or every other night.
Well, so then what happened was there was a July birthday party at Peachy and Tom's house.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All my guests are so well.
Yeah.
They're all intertwined.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a warm summer night. And I lived over on Packer Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot to drink. And so I went to get into my car to drive home.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
And Peachy and Tom's boys grabbed me and said, hey, Dave, we'll take you home. And I said, oh, okay. And I got home. I got in the house. And
wow.
I went to bed, and I laid in bed and thought, something's wrong with me.
Wow.
So I didn't drive, but I would have if they wouldn't have come out.
Oh, my gosh.
And so in 1996, it was a New Year's Eve party, and I was invited to Williamsport Country Club. Okay, and Chrisman was doing and it was a lot of people I knew, and it was a fun time. And a friend of mine called David Person, he had passed away. All right, Christmas Eve was New Year's Eve was his birthday.
Okay.
All right, and so I'm just sitting there, and a couple of guys come up and said, one drink for Dave, and they had a shot. And I had not been drinking. And so I said, all right, one shot. And I took a shot, and I put the glass down. I said, I'm never going to drink again.
Right there was your moment.
Yeah.
Like my friend said, you will know when you're done.
That's exactly right.
And nobody can explain why.
No.
Wow. And that was in 1996.
1996, yes.
So you've been sober. I can't do the math.
Yeah. Wow. I don't want to let you know how old I am.
I mean, I could do the math if I thought about it. But you've been sober for how long then? So 96 is, 25 years or around 25 years?
Close.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And
see, I did that.
That was.
Well.
And then.
I wish I had a better answer for people. How do you know when you're done? But you just don't. It just happens. Like, that is amazing to me that all these events happen. But that one time you put down that shot glass and you're like, that's it.
Well, then I met a guy that helped me out. He says, I wonder, am I an alcoholic?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there was definitely signs that I was.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
And there are, my opinion, are different types of alcoholics, because I didn't drink all the time.
Right.
But when I drank a lot.
But when you drank it up good, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But
so, okay, did you ever get any therapy at all?
I did. I started going to AA meetings.
Okay.
Okay. And I got a sponsor, and we went through the 12 steps. All right. And
AA has saved so many
Oh.
lives.
Well, the thing that I found amazing about AA is that, it's all walks of life. The people who you would think, look at all you have to lose. Well,
But disease isn't logical.
no,
Clearly, right?
no, it
Because
isn't.
you're a very logical person, and you didn't use logical thinking in any of your decisions.
Yeah.
So disease is not logical, and
No.
it doesn't know race, gender, age.
It can anybody.
Do you still attend AA meetings, or
No.
how long did you go to AA?
Probably while I was doing my 12 steps, I probably went off and on for a year, maybe a year and a half. Okay. And it's not that, it was, but I felt comfortable
When you left,
when I left.
thought,
yeah, and
okay.
I kept in contact with my sponsor.
Okay.
But the thing that I was amazed, the first day I went to one, I heard the story and I thought, oh, this is me.
Wow.
And
Talk about holding a mirror
oh
up to
yeah.
you.
And I didn't share. I went, I don't know how many before I was able to talk about it.
Sure.
And but there was tremendous support there. And the thing is, those old timers in AA, you couldn't fool them.
Right.
You could give all
right.
the rationale. And they just
all
they
the
look
excuses.
at you, go, yeah,
Yep.
you're still drinking, though, aren't
right.
you? No, but
how important has, and you said you did do a little bit of therapy, right? As well? Like, did you ever see a counselor or
No.
a therapist? None. Okay. So you went to AA, and then how important has faith been, if at all? I don't know. If you're a faithful man, how important has that been in your journey of recovery and forgiveness?
Well, very important. In AA, I mean, it was started through believing in
right.
Jesus.
That's one of their...
Right, but then,
I think they've switched it to just any form of faith now, or
right,
God,
higher
or
power,
yeah, right.
That's of your understanding.
Right.
But most people come around to the fact that, it's God, and but it's been big, and this is, I'm going to share something. This is what turned me to dedicating my life to try to prevent drinking and driving. When I was teaching at Lock Haven, many years later, I was sitting in my office, which I shared with my office mate, and he was also a health educator. He taught the drug ed course, and he was getting his class prepared for a speaker. It was a little lady, cafeteria lady from Bellefonte. And she was sitting maybe, 10 feet from me. And I was working at my desk, but I could feel her presence. And her name was Dottie Smith. And she lost her daughter to a drunk 16-wheeler driver that ran into the back of her car while she was changing a tire.
Oh, my gosh.
And killed her and knocked her down over a bank. And they didn't find her for a while. Well, Dottie was only, I think she was like 5'1".
Hey, now, I'm 5'2".
I'm sorry.
Okay.
And I was in a swivel chair, and I could feel, and this may sound corny. I don't
Nothing sounds weird to me. I'm like out there, so go for it.
I could feel the presence.
I knew you were going
God
to say
saying,
that.
you need to talk to her. So I wheeled around and I said, could I talk to you? And she said, sure. And she thought I had lost someone to a drunk driver because she was going to speak to the class.
Right, about that.
Yes. So I stood up, and she stood up, and she walked over to me, and I said, Daddy, I'm a drunk driver, and I killed somebody. And she looked at me, and tears came to her eyes, and she hugged me, and
Mm.
said, you know, I love you, God loves you, and we can make a difference. And she said, if you would help my husband and I. And I said, I'll do whatever you need me to
Oh
do.
my gosh.
So now, the first time I spoke.
Can we just stop for a
Sure,
minute?
yeah. I'm sorry.
I'd like to point out, no, you're fine. I'd like to point out how courageous that was of her.
Oh, see.
And what a huge lesson in forgiveness that is.
Yep. And
Because being a mother, I'm trying not to cry. If I lost one of my daughters, I think I could eventually get there because I'm a very faithful person, but it would be really hard to hug another person that was also a drunk driver that killed someone.
Yeah.
That was huge of her. And I would also like everyone listening to understand that when you approach other human beings without judgment and with grace and with understanding from their perspective and not just from your perspective or your judgment or anger, that you can change a life. You can change lives, not just one life. And her kindness and forgiveness to you opened up like such a ripple effect of you touching so many other people's lives now. And that's all God wants.
Yeah. No.
You know, God allows darkness to happen and exist so that the light can be shined on him. So I just wanted to
that's
interject.
True. Without him, no, because like I said, I buried it. I never talked about it.
Well,
I
that was
never
a coping
cried.
mechanism. Wow.
I remember the first time I cried. I was in Harrisburg speaking to lawyers and judges at a MAD conference.
Wow.
And I started to feel this overwhelming emotion from my stomach. It was a physical feeling, and it kept coming and coming. And next thing I know, I'm crying. I can't. I stopped.
Like on stage.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I, took a glass of water and drank it and started again. And the one lady who was working with MAD, she was a psychologist, and she said, "Dave, that's everything you've stuffed." Finally, it was coming out.
Oh my gosh.
And again, I don't want this for the people out there who may be suffering from what I did. Your family is. I don't mean for this to sound like it makes everything good, makes everything okay. I can understand people still being angry at me, and that's fine. That's part of
just part of being human.
Decision making, and I understand that. And
well, and let me say this, Dave. So I never really understood this until a few years ago. But one person or one family's pain and suffering does not lessen another person's. They're just different.
Right.
So I can totally understand when you're the person that caused such a horrific event and you caused someone else's death. I can 100% understand that every time the light is shined on you like I'm doing, and every time we might talk about your pain or your recovery, it's kind of unnerving to you because you don't want people to think that lessens the pain of the victim.
That's right.
And it doesn't, because you can both be in pain, the victim's family and you, but it's just different pain.
Obviously, how can God ever forgive me for what I did? And through my church and the people in my church and different pastors, I've learned, I finally forgave myself for what I did. And that doesn't mean I don't regret what I did. I do regret what I did immensely. But I can't go on my whole life, kicking myself. And again, I'm hesitant to say that because if there's people out there, and I'm sure there are, that are going to hear this and think, what? You never feel like I do it because I lost my son or daughter. And
right.
So,
but thank you for saying that, because when you are a victim or a victim's family, your pain is so just overwhelming that you can't get to the point in the spiritual journey that you understand forgiveness. And that's okay. There's no judgment, but it is important to get to the place of forgiveness, because out of forgiveness comes love.
Mm-hmm.
And you never would have been able to impact so many others if you would have locked yourself in your house,
Mm-hmm.
stayed an alcoholic, been depressed, and, been just hating on yourself. You wouldn't have been using your energy to help others. So forgiveness is huge and it's important. And I'm glad you finally got to that point.
Well, and Dottie Smith, she didn't even know me and forgave me. And they said this was very important to them. And a lot of victims have said this. They wish that drunk drivers would speak about it and say they're sorry, because that at least it helps understand that, hey, they're out there doing something
and
good
it probably
now.
gives those families some sort of solace.
Yes.
Because they probably never heard it from
Oh no.
the person that killed their loved one. Wow. That's very impactful, Dave. So do you have any advice for anyone that's listening that may have a drinking problem themselves, or they're dealing with a loved one that may be an alcoholic and they know this person willingly drinks and drives? Do you have any advice or resources?
First of all, for the first point, if you have a problem, if alcohol or a drug is causing a problem with your family, your relationship, your marriage, your kids, your job, then it is a problem. And if it is a problem, you need to get it taken care of. How do you do that? A West Branch Drug and Alcohol is an outstanding resource. We are very fortunate, in the state. I think Lycoming County is right up there with support and available resources for you. There's no reason you need to go this alone if you contact West Branch. As far as someone in your family drinks and drives, teaching it at Lock Haven, many of my students came up and said, my brother does it, my dad does it, my mom does it.
Sure.
They said, what do I do? I said, well, this is going to sound cruel, and you may have a tough time doing it. If he does it or she does it, call the police and say they're driving.
Right.
And I said, now, they're going to be mad because most of us are mad when, somebody calls us out. And I remember my mom one time said to me, you're a drunkie. That's what you are, and I was embarrassed and I was mad because she called me that.
Right. And I think, like I said, through speaking to other people with drug and alcohol abuse, everybody has a different rock bottom. Mm-hmm. But along the way, God sends angels through people that are going to continue to help you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you don't listen.
No.
It doesn't matter if you don't end up going to rehab or AA. But to save somebody else's life by calling the police while you figure out, it's time to stop is I never thought of that. That's a really good point. And I will link under the video some resources to AA and West Branch and everything. So I know you said that you do obviously regret you're, an empathetic, normal human person. You do regret your decision. But what does your spiritual life look like now that you have forgiven yourself? Are you still talking to God daily? Is it important for you to keep God in your life?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, to stay on track.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And are you still publicly speaking?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you don't just work with West Branch. Do you conduct any type of weekly or monthly meetings or anything?
The only one I do is with GRASP.
Mm-hmm.
We have a monthly meeting.
Okay.
For those
and
people.
Who is that for? Who can come?
GRASP is the acronym. It's a grief recovery after a substance passing, meaning that that's a support group for families who've lost loved ones because of addiction.
Okay.
And the families that we have in our group, all of them have lost their kids.
Have you seen a positive change since your crash, 1977 to 2023? Have you seen more education community outreach with prevention, communication. Have you seen, especially with the MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, have you seen a positive movement towards drinking and driving?
Definitely. I really believe that, that the people are more aware, kids are more aware.
There's definitely more education in schools.
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
But, initially schools were reluctant.
Wow.
There were schools that when, I'd contact them and say, hey, I'll come in and speak about this. And no, they didn't want.
Wow.
No.
You know what I remember in high school was I think it was the fire company that did it. They used to bring and set up in the parking lot the fake crash and bring us out, and then somebody would speak to us. And I had MAD, and there was a lot of education on it. I look at my daughters, and I can honestly give hope to people listening and I compliment them all the time on their generation. I don't see their generation being as stupid as our generation.
No.
And probably not even as stupid as I think we get less stupid as we go down. But, and I do compliment them on that, and I'm proud of them. And I don't see them drinking as much. And man, they're just more responsible. They're like, oh, I'm the DD tonight.
Yeah.
And they don't mind it.
No, they don't.
They don't mind it. They don't feel like they're missing out on something. So I think whatever we've been doing is working. Yeah. But just to let everybody know, because I found some alarming statistics, and you give your comments on them if you'd like. So alcohol contributes to 40% of fatal crashes. 40%. That was high. And every 51 minutes, a driver dies and gets injured from a drunk driving related accident. So just in the amount of time that we've been talking, someone died from drunk driving.
Right.
Fatal car accidents as a result of drinking double on the weekends, which reminds me of, you were at a wedding. Of course, I've been at weddings and parties. I'm sure it is higher on the weekends.
No, it is.
College-age drivers are involved in 19% of drunk driving accidents. That was from MAD. Most alcohol-impaired drivers occur in 21 to 24-year-olds. That's scary because I have a 20 and a 22-year-old. But they don't really drink, thank God. And then the next age group is 25 to 34-year-olds. And who do you think are more likely to drink and drive, men or women?
Men.
Yep. So now, of course, the penalties are so much higher.
Very.
Okay, and they vary from state to state.
They'll put you in a program, okay, where you're going to have to go to meetings. You're going to have to hear counselors. We have a victim impact panel.
Okay.
Night, and it was done 4 times a week in Lycoming County over at Penn College, and all these first-time offenders, okay, met in a big an auditorium there.
Yeah.
And there were usually over 100, and that was over a 6-month period, And
they had to hear victim stories.
Wow. Exactly. People who had lost. And some of the families got real angry, and...
well, hey, if that's what it takes to wake them up.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting, too, because I would say that many of them are usually that first-time offender's been drinking and driving for over 5 years.
Wow.
And
they were like you. They thought they were invincible.
Exactly. You start to develop a behavior, like I can drink and drive. And but the penalties can be like today if I would do what I did. Okay. So probably I would be in a state prison because I critically injured a person and killed a person, probably about 8 years.
Wow.
I was going to bring a letter when I was teaching at Lock Haven. I got from a woman who was sentenced to 4 years or 4 or 5 years, 5 years in Muncie prison for stopping at a bar on her way home from work to meet her friends. She had a few drinks. She had too many. All right, crossed the median line, hit somebody, and killed them.
Oh.
And she had a little boy at home, and just I don't think she thought she was intoxicated.
Right.
But
Right.
the penalties have gotten more severe.
Well, which is good, but I'm of two minds on that because, gosh, it's just such a touchy subject because you don't set out that night to kill somebody.
No.
However, on the other hand, you have to be responsible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you have to understand that your actions have consequences. So I can definitely see both sides, but don't you think we've moved into more distracted driving now, especially with, and I'm glad you brought this up because I wasn't even thinking of this, but the texting and driving.
Yeah.
So
marijuana and driving is big.
And marijuana and driving. And you might not know this and it's fine. It just kind of popped in my head. What is the difference in marijuana and driving and drinking and driving as far as your reflexes? Is it the same? Like, does it slow your reflexes down for both? Because I feel like people don't take pot as serious as alcohol. Oh, I'm not drinking and driving. I just smoked a little weed.
That's right.
But it's going to slow down your reflexes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Wow.
And it stays in your system longer.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's
so. Is marijuana and driving, is that causing higher crashes now than drinking and driving?
At our last DUI advisory council, state police they come in and they give reports and so forth. They said that their arrests have are much higher and at one point had exceeded the alcohol. Because
that is something I never would have guessed. I never would have guessed.
Because a lot of people who don't drink use pot, or somebody has, recreational, they do it in their home. Okay, they're not hurting anybody.
Right.
They jump in the car, they go to the store.
Right.
And there's a crash, or it could be a fender bender. The next thing they're going to test you. They're going to smell the marijuana. And
well, this is what I thought was interesting about texting and driving as well. Texting while driving is 6 times as deadly than drinking and driving. Texting and driving kills 6 times more people than drinking and driving. I think we have to get more awareness out there about the texting and driving. 25% of car accidents are the result of cell phone usage. Ugh. Okay, this one I can't even take. 11 teens die from texting and driving every day. Every day. So when I go home and go to bed tonight, I'm going to think about that now. 11 teenagers died today because they were texting and driving.
I think in our victim impact panels, we hear the stories of the families, and they tell the story of getting that phone call.
Oh.
And
oh God.
When they get to the hospital, like I said, they go to the morgue.
Right.
But the number of people, and I would say that out of 100 people in a victim impact panel that are there because they're driving under the influence, that probably 50% of them will drink and drive again or even more. And probably there's a percentage of them that are alcoholics. Okay, yeah. There's not too many first-time offenders that's the first time they drank and drove. It was just like me, And I guess the issue is with me, is that I was negligent in my thought process. I didn't make decisions until it was too late.
Right.
When you have the drug in you, you're not going to make.
You're not making logical decisions.
And that's why you were correct. I think when you said that kids today, I think are much more aware of that with designated drivers.
But I feel like we've replaced it with now texting and driving.
Oh yeah.
So although I see them doing a fantastic job with not drinking and driving. Now I'm worried about the texting.
No, it's the same.
And if parents are listening, please, I cannot plead with you enough. And even us as adults, I'm guilty too. Get them when they're young. Have them watch something like this where someone, made a decision that impacted so many and changed so many lives. But And I didn't put this. Can I ask you a question that's
Sure.
not on there
Yeah.
that I just thought of?
Sure.
So let's end it with this question.
Okay.
If you had the chance to speak with those two ladies in the courtroom,
Mm-hmm.
that when you walked out, they had their head in their hands, and it was probably maybe his wife, his mother, his sister. If you did have the opportunity to talk to them, what would you say?
Well, I'd tell them that I know I don't have any words that can express how sorry I am. And I am regretful for what I did. I made a bad choice, and but here's what I'm doing now to try not to undo it. And I don't expect your pain to be any less, but I would hope that me sharing what I'm doing now might give you some comfort, knowing that God has touched my life, and I'm trying to change other people's lives by working with DUI offenders, drug court, those kind of things. I mean, God touched me and said, hey, you took away, you need to give back. Mm. And so that's what I'd say.
That's great. That's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you are watching on YouTube and not listening on audio, the following is a victim tribute video, often used by Dave at his presentations. The following victims in this video were killed or injured on the highways of Pennsylvania due to drunk driving. Not a day goes by that the pain of this tragedy is not felt by their loved ones, and Dave continues to advocate in honor of his victim.